Erasmus in terms of what I found in the file. Erasmus came to me to support the extension. Perhaps he thought that I could have assisted them, and it would have made the decision of Kasheka easier. I wasn't aware of all of the other engagements in terms of the threats and so on. I wasn't aware of this.
Well, of the role players involved, it can only be one of two people, possibly, that told Dr. Mkhwanazi. It was either you or it was Ms. Kasheka. But we know at some point she was in favor of the extension, and then she changes her mind. Chief Mapiyeye wouldn't have told, and neither would Ms. Ngiza, because they say she found out about it.
I mentioned to Ms. Mkhwanazi, Dr. Mkhwanazi, that there was a request to look at the docket to support an extension. These are the issues I picked up. Beyond that, I was not involved in the further process. So I had a discussion to talk about the documents that I found and the process I found, which needed to be addressed further. And not to, because if that was the case, I wouldn't have then proceeded to look at suggesting, let's proceed immediately with the disciplinary process. If there was something that I was waiting, because I suggested to any Erasmus, a lieutenant colonel, that you can proceed immediately. If it was a matter of me now trying to impact that and giving her update, why would I suggest something like this to proceed immediately?
Mr. Behari, in all that you've just said now, you have admitted that you informed Dr. Mkhwanazi about the request for the extension of the suspension.
Chair, I mentioned earlier on when you asked me, did you give an update who you communicated with? And I did communicate to Dr. Mkhwanazi. She was, in terms of giving an update on the issues. So when I said to Erasmus, it was not my intent to say, no, stop it. I do not know what was going to be the resultant impact of that. Because I have to give an update to the HOD, to the city manager, to say, this is where I found, I think we must concretize our case this way. And I've spoken to Erasmus about that. Hence, I suggested in paragraph 62, let's proceed to Erasmus, Lieutenant Colonel, let's proceed immediately.
Why do you need to give an update to the city manager? She's not part of the process. According to Ms. Ngiza, he isn't even authorized to grant the suspension, the extension. It must be motivated by Chief Mapiyeye and approved by Ms. Ngiza. The city manager has no involvement. Kasheka, my apologies, Kasheka. So on what basis then do you feel that you should inform the city manager about a process which, when she gave evidence here herself, said that she doesn't get involved in that process?
The city manager doesn't get involved in the process because it's delegated to the HOD. But when that initial suspension happened, the initial suspension, I think sometimes in February, Kasheka, the city manager was aware of the process and that there was suspension. There are these allegations, there are serious allegations about CAT VIP and so on. So my response to city manager Dr. Mkhwanazi was as a result of her being aware of that process. So she knew about the involvement or the suspension, which at the beginning was involved, and I understand she knew about it and there was no objection at that stage. But to go further than from what I involve, everything that we deal with, and you escalate it and you say to the city manager, I've dealt with the stuff, this is the way the process is. I didn't know that thereafter what was the take on that.
Mr. Behari, why did you feel the need to go inform the city manager about the request by Chris Erasmus? Because it has nothing to do with her. It's an HR issue that can be dealt with by HR people. You've already said she's aware of the serious allegations. So you don't need to tell her about those. They come to you as head of legal, seeking legal advice on the extension of a suspension. That has nothing to do with the city manager. You then go and tell her that Erasmus is seeking the extension of the suspension. So the very first question that was put to you, was it you? It could only have been you. Your initial answer was no. But then in the course of answering other questions, you actually admitted that it was you who told the city manager about the request to extend the suspension.
Chair, I think when it was at the very outset, when I was asked about who did you brief on it, I mentioned city manager and I mentioned the HOD. Now, in terms of the relationship, when I spoke to Lieutenant Colonel Erasmus, after that, I had to brief the city manager, say, right, on this issue, critical issue, this is what the next stage is. I'm asked to support an extension, and I've dealt with it and engaged with Lieutenant Colonel Erasmus. So thereafter, whatever happened, transpired from there, who was called and so on, I don't know, Chair.
But the question is, why do you brief the city manager? This level of employee, Mkhwanazi, doesn't fall with, as I've understood the evidence, he's not in the category of people where the city manager becomes involved with his disciplinary action or disciplinary action against him. And that the city manager confirmed that doesn't belong there. You speak to Erasmus, as Commissioner Khumalo says, because Erasmus has come to you to ask for guidance according to you. Why are you discussing this with the city manager? It's not, if you're concerned about briefing the city manager to keep her in the loop, it seems to me that's a job for HOD, Human Resources, not your burden. You don't get to grant extensions of suspension. You have nothing to do with this process other than Erasmus has come and spoken to you now. Why are you speaking to the city manager about a mid-level manager?
Chair, the issue was greater than a mid-level manager. The issue was about the involvement of CAT VIP and Medicare 24 in our city. The city manager at that level must, when she decided to go on and approve the initial, or talk to the suspension initially, would have to be briefed into the process of flow in terms of what are we uncovering, how are we supporting that to finalize the disciplinary.
Is your short answer that Dr. Mkhwanazi was involved with this disciplinary steps and process against Brigadier Mkhwanazi? Is that the short answer to what I've said?
The initial complaint came through, it became aware of the entire city. She's the accounting officer of the city.
Yes.
So as that, there was an interest in terms of what is happening with the matter.
No,
so,
she didn't ask you. You went, your evidence is, you met with her and then you told her this, among other things. So this is not a case of she called you, at least that's not what you've said, that she called you and asked you what's happening. You were talking to her and you mentioned this.
Yes.
And the question is, but this is none of her business at this point. There's an ongoing disciplinary process, and all that you have been asked, by the way, is to, according to you, to give guidance on extending a suspension. That's all you've been asked. Erasmus didn't approach you to discuss and get advice on the merits of this disciplinary action. He's come to you in your statement to get guidance on the extension. What is there to discuss with the city manager? Why are you speaking to the city manager about this? And I want to propose something to you, that you're discussing this with her because you know her interest. Interest not as neutral, but because she's close to Mkhwanazi. You know she doesn't want Mkhwanazi to be disciplined. That's why you're talking to her about this. I want to propose that. That's a real reason why you discuss this with her, when in fact it's none of her business at this point. It's still under Gasheka's and Niza's control to run that process up to where they wish to take it to finality. So it has nothing to do with her, and you knew that. You know that she's not involved with it. And so I'm suggesting to you, the reason you discuss it with her is because you knew her direct interest in the disciplinary action against Mkhwanazi, 1. 2, you knew that she doesn't want disciplinary action to be taken against him, and that's the only reason that you talked to her about it.
Chair, on point 1 and 2, I don't support that. I don't agree with it. I did not know what her direct interest was, and there was nothing about not taking disciplinary action against Mkhwanazi. Because if that was the case, it would have been stopped in the previous time when the suspension was started in February when there was approved. They would have stopped then. My interest was, and I briefed city manager on all critical issues relating to the city. Every matter that comes through in which I've dealt with, I give the city manager an update to say I've dealt with it. On this matter, to say that Colonel Erasmus came to me, we're looking at how we can finalize make sure that the charges are concrete, to make sure what evidence is required, and that is what the extent of my discussion. It was very brief in that regard. Nothing further. I was not aware of any other interest the city manager had, and I was not part of any other interest. It is about just looking at, and on a daily basis, Chair, on many matters. As long as it's the interest of the city, we give that briefing, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Behari.
And then you say you advise the city manager on the shortcomings of the city's case against Mkhwanazi. So in other words, what you state in paragraph 56 to 61, that's what you told the city manager.
Chair, in stating that to the city manager, it was about how we can cure the defects, how we can look at finalizing that process, which I discussed with Erasmus. That is what my engagement was. Because my interest was to see that we do not have a case where we don't cover all our bases. And that is what, since I've been there in the city, in all our cases, not only in this one here, but in all matters, whether it's whichever space. So I did tell the CM we need to cover on these issues. These are the issues I found, we need to cover
You
these
see,
issues.
Mr. Behari, exactly what you said in the middle of your answer. We don't have a case. That's exactly what Ms. Mashazi, Dr. Mashazi said, that she was acting on your advice.
Yes.
You advised her that the city does not have a case against Mkhwanazi. In fact, she went on TV to say something to that effect.
Chair, based on the circumstances as it stood, I mean, the narrow constraints which was mentioned by the chair and so on individual charges, yes. But holistically, in terms of what I required, and this is what I briefed the city manager on, to say that there are still these issues that we needed to finalize.
I mean, even Gwabe's affidavit, in paragraph 3, he says Mkhwanazi misrepresented the facts to him. Mkhwanazi said to him, there is a signed memorandum. And it's on 277 or 177. We've been there before, so you must have seen it. 277.
Chair,
You can read it, it's there.
yeah,
Paragraph 3.
I don't discount what you're saying, Chair. Mkhwanazi contacted me indicating that the MPD had signed a memorandum.
He says, Mkhwanazi said there's a signed memorandum.
Yeah.
So everything Gwabe says about donations happens because Mkhwanazi misrepresented the facts to him. Mkhwanazi misrepresented the fact that there's a memorandum that is signed.
Chair.
You know there's no signed memorandum.
I know that, Chair.
Yes.
And Gwabe, as a divisional head, ought to have done his process and asked him, where's the signed memorandum?
See, you're doing exactly what Chair warned you not to do. You are asked about Mkhwanazi. You deflect, you go to the people he dealt with and you say they are the ones who should have done something. Mkhwanazi should not have misrepresented the facts. It's as simple as that.
Chair, I agree that he should not have misrepresented. But there must be some level of due diligence to the person who is receiving that representation, who is in a position of power and knowledge within the city. It cannot be that everybody comes and says to you, this is what, that you go on and make decisions and take action without verifying the sources, or without verifying the facts on which are presented to you.
Mr. Behari, I've said this before, at the risk of repeating myself. When you realize that all those people have not done what they are supposed to do, the answer is to investigate and charge them. The answer is not to say, because they did something wrong in the past, we don't have a case against Mkhwanazi. That is incorrect.
Chair, that will amount to several separations of the process. Remember, this arises from one incident. It arises from one incident. It arises from the engagements of the donations. It arises from CAT VIP and Medicare 24 being in the city. Now, if we're going to start doing individual charges, when we could have holistically sorted out who has done what, who could have been accountable, because if there's going to be denials, why should we go with a weak case And then I'll say, okay, no, we can charge the other people. We'll investigate. That is one of the issues we're trying to curtail. That you can't have too many processes arising out of one incident, Chair.
Are you going to show us a memorandum where you say to the city of Ekurhuleni or the city manager, let's investigate and charge all these people?
Chair, there's no such memorandum.
Because it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist
because you didn't tell her that these people should be investigated. You didn't say to her, on the face of these documents, Stein did something wrong. We must investigate him. On the face of these documents, Kwabe did something wrong. We must investigate him. On the face of these documents, Mapiyaya did something wrong in relation to the draft MOUs that were sent to him. We must investigate. You never did any of that. What you said to the city manager was that we don't have a good case against Mkhwanazi. And that is why we are here and talking to you today.
Chair, the progress or the engagement of the city manager will say, I've received this report. These are what the issues I've looked at. Now, in us finalizing that, would have looked at, is there other cases? And hence my engagement with Erasmus was. So at that stage, I didn't go to the extent of saying, that's because they would have came as a witness for the city. Gwabe has said this. As a witness for the city, Stein has said this. Now, if Erasmus then was to finalize, that would be risking our case against Mkhwanazi. That was the focus. We're looking at the case against Mkhwanazi. If subsequently we found that there was any statements that were inconsistent, we could have went through that. But the main issue here was to cover the serious issue of Mkhwanazi, the donations, the CAT VIP, and who was involved in the process. It could have also included Chief of Police. It could have also included Reverse Peace, because Mgwabe, Mzolo. So this is what I'm saying, that from my side, it was about having holistically to look at how we're going to deal with the matter. My brief update was with the city manager to say these are what the concerns I have. Thank you.
So was your difficulty that only Mkhwanazi is being charged and the chief and Spies and others are not being charged? I'm asking on the back of the last thing you said now.
Chair, that's not the difficulty I had. I was happy with Chief Mkhwanazi being charged for whatever it is. But there was much more serious, and I said, Mkhwanazi, but what else? Because there's much more incidents of...
Why are you asking what else when an individual is being charged? Sorry, I don't understand. An employee is accused of serious misconduct, and the process has started. According to you, the city manager supported it at the beginning, and indeed, that's the evidence of Mr. Ngqiza and Chief Mapiyaya, that before any steps were taken against Brigadier Mkhwanazi, they went to speak to the city manager, and when they were asked the question, both witnesses, when they were asked, why did you do that? They said, we did that because we know that they're close, they have a close relationship, and we didn't want to get into trouble about it. We wanted to inform her in advance, and she was supportive of whatever action we are going to take. So we know that, and you've just confirmed she knew from the get-go. Disciplinary, certain steps are taken against this one employee. Why do you now, when you are asked by Mr. Erasmus to guide him about an extension, you now go and speak to the city manager? Why in that speaking to the city manager do you now start saying, what about the others? As if it has any consequence whatsoever for disciplinary steps being taken against the individual?
It had no consequence, and I didn't raise that with the city manager. The issue was raised with Erasmus in our conversation. Which are the other witnesses that are outstanding? Because the evidence is pointing, or to say that CAT VIP and all way in the city. And I'm taking it back to the issue of the State of the City Address. Who was involved in the State of the City Address? It was also Mkhwanazi that was involved in the State of the City Address. And that is why I'm saying it is a very serious issue, but you're focusing on a donation issue? Yes, by all means. You're focusing on the MOU issue? By all means. But then what is the process that was followed from the State of the City Address? Who are all the people who should be informed? That was never discussed with the city manager. The city manager gave an update as to accordingly Mgwabe, we need to sort this matter out, we need to finalize this. So we concretize our case against Mkhwanazi. If it came up later on, there were other officials involved from the further investigation, then so be it, it could have taken place. I didn't give a comment or a memorandum to city manager in that regard.
Okay. So you when you spoke to the city manager, you told her that the case against Mr. Mkhwanazi is not good. You would have said that because that's what you advise Mr. Erasmus.
Yeah. I said there was concerns that I had on these issues, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Baloy. Mr. Behari, I think we can probably move on to your evidence earlier on when you were leading your own evidence. You had said that after the 22nd of June 2023, when you engaged with Chief Mapiyeye, you didn't have any further involvement in this matter until 2025, with the exception of the IPID issue. Is that correct?
No, IPID issue happened in 2023, in November. I think it was a November period.
It was September, yes. That's when yes. But other than that aspect, you had no involvement in Commissioner Mkhwanazi's disciplinary issue for 2 years until 2025.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we know that in May, the suspension is then not extended, and Commissioner Mkhwanazi comes back to work. And what happens to the disciplinary process?
Chair, I didn't, because it was gone into the HR space. I didn't go back further and look at it. Erasmus didn't come back to me. Chief of Police, I think on the 22nd, sent me a letter. 22nd of June, 2023.
21st of June, yes.
Yeah, I dated 21st, but I received, served in my office on the 22nd.
Yes. That was following the discussion you had with him on that same day.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
I'm speaking about, so after June, there's...
I had no engagements on that until the IPID document came through.
Okay. Now, your evidence was that on the 22nd of August 2023, the city manager issues this directive, which has this legal review, extra step, legal review assessment that's done by your team. And that's in August 2023. In May 2023, you had given Lieutenant Colonel, what is his name now? Erasmus, your views on the matter. You're now in charge. In August 2023, there's a directive by the city manager that you must do a review. Why is it that you don't go back to that matter and say, what's happened here? We now have somebody who's facing serious allegations back at work, and I haven't heard back from anyone after I told them that they must look into these deficiencies.
Chair, once I deal with, in my environment, dealing with all the departments, from a day-to-day, I don't have the luxury to go back. So if it has happened that way, the direct further processes will be through the HR process. If it came back to me for some other reasons, for some other compliance, I would have dealt with it. Matter never came back to me. So it's very difficult to follow up on cases when I've given an opinion, and that happens with all the other departments. If I'm seeking a given opinion or discussion and say what can be done, I would think that you would either implement what I'm saying. If you decide not to proceed, then it's of course entirely up to that. But I don't follow up on these matters in all the departments I'm dealing with. If I have a discussion with you, I'll say to you, this is what I think we should happen, and thereafter it closes from there. If it comes back to me in another system where you say, I've addressed these issues, let's take it further, I would have taken it further.
But this is such a serious matter that you felt the need to voluntarily inform and brief the city manager on it because she was involved in some way in that process. So between the two of you, nobody is asking questions about the continuation of these disciplinary proceedings on charges which you both consider to be serious charges and somebody that is back in employment with the city.
Chair, it was not only that he was back in employment, I understood that he was also applied for a position and was given a higher position. So it's not only in this matter. It's look at that I'm dealing, but I don't have the luxury of that. I've got other departments, same thing. I will give city manager a briefing if I've met with the environmental department. If there's something, I'll give her a briefing and say, this is what it is, this is what I've recommended, and we'll wait for it to come back. But I don't go back and follow up, because then it becomes an HR process specifically until, it comes back to me by some query or another.